to Designs by Diane. Today we're going to work on the Spiderweb Quilt. We're going to work on sewing our strips together, cutting our strips accurately, and getting our scant 1/4-inch seam. Come along and let's get to quilting. Today's pattern is the Spiderweb block. We're going to make the Spiderweb Quilt. I have drawn up this pattern for us so we will know what we need, how many blocks of each color, how to position these blocks. We're going to need 66 blocks in all. We're going to cut strips 2.5 inches wide. We need 5 different fabrics, and we're going to need 11 strips of each fabric, but we'll get into that in just a few moments. But we have our pattern here. We know how to position our blocks. The blue blocks on the edges will eventually be trimmed off. We only put those there to finish out our rectangle, so we will trim those later. The other tools we're going to need good fabric, but we'll talk about that in a minute. We're going to need pins, a good sewing machine, and the things that go with it, which are pins, seam rippers. You can use the old-fashioned seam ripper, or you can use a rotary cutter. I have this small rotary cutter that was sent to me in the mail with some promotional item. It is wonderful for picking out the seams, and you can do it rather quickly, but you have to be careful. So don't do it the first time on a good project. Go ahead and sew something and then just practice on it. We need cutting implements such as scissors. We need our rotary cutters. Always have a sharp rotary cutter. They make sharpeners that you can buy. I have sharpened this one this morning, and hopefully we won't have any problems today. We're going to need good thread and good fabric. Make sure you get good quality thread. A lot of quilts can be done with just white thread. You don't have to match everything until you get to areas that will really show. So good quality thread. We're going to need measuring tools. You can use the tape measure. Buy a new one. Do not use one that's got grease or dirt on it that your husband may have in his toolbox. Get you one of your own. Or I like this flexible tape measure. It retracts and it's very nice. We're going to need our rulers. This is my large 15-inch square. I love my large square. I can use it for so many things. I can square up the corner of the quilt when I'm trimming it off at the end. I can trim it, square it up so I can get good cuts on my strips. It's just very nice. So if you can only have one ruler, get a large square. We will use that to trim, to cut our strips. Then after we get our strips, we're going to use a large equilateral triangle. This is called a Star Maker 6 by K Wood. You can use any brand that's out there that you want to buy, but I used this one and it worked very well with this pattern. But it's called the Star Maker 6 by K Wood. I don't usually tell the product names, but some of them are just so good I do not mind advertising a little bit for them. We've got our cutting mat, we've got our tools. We're going to talk about our fabric in just a moment, so let's get busy. Now, we want to talk about the fabric we're going to use for this quilt. We're going to put a lot of work into this quilt, so we want to make sure we have top quality material. This doesn't mean you can't get it on sale, but be careful if you get something off of the discount rack. Sometimes they mark materials down for a reason, and you want to be careful. This pattern uses 5 different colors. I started with dark, a little bit lighter, and all 5 of them gradually come up to this lightest fabric at the end. We're going to cut triangles to where the big end is green on one and the big end is white, the cream colored on the next one, and we're going to rotate them, so it's going to make our pattern. So you want to get 5 different fabrics. You need a little bit less than a yard of each one of these, and then another yard of whichever color you're going to do your borders and your binding out of. So make sure you get top quality 100% cotton material, and if you want to pre-wash it, go ahead and do that. I do not do that, but if you would like to, take your material, cut the corners before you put them in the washer and dryer, and they will not fray so bad in your machines and you won't have so much lint build up. Then take them out just before they dry, in that last bit of the cycle, and fold them into a long rectangle and hang them over a hanger and let them finish drying in that position, and you usually won't have too much trouble with them when you go to cut with them. Other than that, I only iron my material if I need to get good cuts. If it has wrinkles really pressed into it from being stored a while, I will iron it first, but usually I don't have to do that. Okay, now we're getting ready to start cutting our material. We want to take them one by one, and we want to get off enough material to work with. We don't want to hold on to all of this. So we're going to take off, enough to get maybe a yard or so to get our strips out of. I'm going to take my material and pull the front layer out of the way and just nick the back layer enough into it so that you can tear it. And this bothers your children, so just enjoy it. Get some aggression out when you tear this material. So we've got our material. We have torn it so we know we're on the grain. That is the point of tearing it. We don't want to necessarily go by that tear. We just want to know we're on the straight of grain at that point. Now, we're going to take our material, pick it up by the selvages, which are the ends that are finished. Sometimes they'll have printing on it, the name of the company that does it. Now, the edges here are not necessarily going to be even. We want the top even, the two layers even, and we're going to slide them left or right until this material hangs straight. Once you get it where it hangs straight, you want to lay it down on your mat and then pull the bottom up and make the bottom even with the top. Don't worry about the sides right now. You want the bottom even with the top again. Then we're going to take our square. You want to take one of the lines on the square and get it even with the bottom of the material. And this is where you have to be able to see. So make sure this cutting mat works for you. Make sure you have all 4 layers sticking out on the end here. And I think I need to come in a little bit more just to make sure. We want to make sure we cut off all 4 layers when we do. We're going to even up the bottom. Then we're going to take our rotary cutter, put your fingers on your large square to make sure it does not slip. There are products you can put on the back of your rulers to make sure they don't slip as easily. Don't use so much force on your rotary cutter that you push your ruler out of the way. Just a good, firm, steady pressure. Then take your rotary cutter, cut straight up along it, and throw that part away. And you have a straight edge here. So we're going to cut 2.5-inch strips, and we're going to need 11 of them of each color. So while I have my square here, it's a 15-inch square. I can get 6 of those strips by just cutting along the other edge of this square. Now, I have done some of my strips ahead of time, but if I needed 6 strips, I would cut here, then I would slide this back to the 12.5 line, cut, come back to the 10-inch line, cut, keep coming down by 2.5 inches until you cut 6 strips out of that. We need 11 strips of each color, and then we'll get started sewing them together. So go ahead and cut your strips for this quilt, and we'll be ready to go.